Good morning, friends. Welcome to Wake Up in the Word. I hope you're having a good morning. Recording this on a Friday morning here in February 2021. Come grab a cup of coffee and join us, and let's look at the Word of God together. We finished up yesterday, Genesis chapter 45. As we finished that passage, what we left was Jacob, now convinced that Joseph is still alive. Jacob, ready to go to Egypt, ready to go see his son. No small task for a man who is probably around 130 years old at the time. That's right, 130. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. But what in the world is he going to do? Well, it says in the very first verse of chapter 46 that Israel set out. Remember, Israel is Jacob's name now. Have you noticed the text is interchangeable? Sometimes it will call him Israel, sometimes it will call him Jacob. It says, So Israel set out with all that was his, and when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Now, here's something that's significant. Yeah, we got to make this trip. Let's get everything together. Let's head down to Egypt. But wait a minute, before we go, first things first, got to seek the Lord. Is this really what he wants? Don't we want God's blessing to be on this particular occasion, on this particular move? This is a big move. This is important. Some of you are going through the same thing right now. You're wondering, should I move? Should I move from one state to the other in the United States? Should I move out of the states to another country? Should I move from another country to somewhere else? These are the kind of things that are happening all the more often today. We're discovering an amazing percentage of people, because of COVID, that seems to be the excuse they're using at least, are moving. Perhaps they lost a job. In many parts of our nation, we're discovering, as Yelp published, that two-thirds of restaurants are going to be closed permanently. Many of these that were mom and pop restaurants or even some of the smaller chains aren't coming back. They're done. They're toast. They've used up all the reserves. They can't restart, not yet anyhow. And so, like many other sectors, there are some jobs that are permanently lost. It's amazing that our news media can look at 750,000 jobs lost or more, as is the case this week, and say, but it was better than expected. Keep in mind, those are first time job losses. So, all kind of things make you move. But in the case of Jacob, what's making him move is good news, really good news. Now, you may have gotten that. Hey, I may have lost a job right here, or my taxes are killing me in the place where I'm living now, but I have good news. I've got a brand new job and it's over yonder somewhere. Now, for some of you who are in the oil and natural gas industry, for example, or the pipeline industry, I mean, some of you right now is kind of suffering, and you're wondering if you're going to have a job and that you may have to shift vocations altogether, take less money instead of more because you had a high paying job that now has been killed. But, regardless of the reason, moving is a big deal. And it was a big deal for Jacob. So what does he do? The same thing you and I should do: seek the Lord. So listen to the way Swindoll talks about this. He said, yes, old Jacob had learned some hard lessons about what happened when he did not talk with God and walk with God. He's been there, done that. He's made the mistakes, and plenty of them. Therefore, it says he wanted to be sure that God was in this. Big move for all the family. So although he loaded up his household and began the journey, when he got to Beersheba, close to the southern border of Canaan, he stopped. And before proceeding any further, he built an altar there and offered sacrifices to the Lord his God. Thankfully, by now, Swindoll writes, Jacob had matured into a seasoned and wise old man. He stopped and waited, willing to learn whether the move to Egypt would be accompanied by the presence and the blessing of God. It must have been a great moment when in the night he was awakened by the voice of God calling, Jacob, Jacob. So that's where we are in the next verse. Listen to what happens. He gets there, offers sacrifices, said, Lord, this is a big deal. I'm not moving any further until you speak to me. I've got to know, is this you or not? Sometimes when we see people who say, God, you got to give me a sign, we say, look, you're tempting God. Don't you know this is the right thing to do? Sometimes you have to put one foot forward. You have to move forward in faith. But for many of us, we have learned through the seasoning of years that if it's an especially big move, you better make sure that God confirms it's what he wants you to do. What are the signals? And maybe do you need more than one signal? How will he confirm it? And it's amazing how God will do just that, sometimes through the smallest of things. I've already heard there have been times when big moves have been confirmed, even by people listening to little devotional programs like this one, where I had no idea that I was even touching that need in their life. But I read a passage of scripture and shared what it meant and hit the button that they were looking for confirmation from so that they could do what they felt like God wanted them to do. So, friends, it's not superstition. It's just the wisdom often of years when we're past being impulsive and we want to go with God. And we want God to wave and say, yeah, come on, this is the way. This is the way. So listen to what happens in this passage. It says, it must have been a great, great moment when in the middle of the night, he was awakened by the very voice of God calling, Jacob, Jacob. Here I am, he replied quietly. I'm God, the God of your father Isaac. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt, for it is there that I will make you a great nation. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will also bring you back to this land again, and your son Joseph will be with you when you die. This is what God's basically telling Jacob in his dream, his vision. This is a major moment, not only for Jacob and his family, but for all of Israel. This is an early prophetic reference to Israel's great exodus from Egypt. Did you see that built into what he said? Now, hang on, don't miss this. In the NIV, the 86 NIV, it says, God spoke to Israel in a vision at night. I am God, the God of your father, it says in verse 3. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. You're going to be made into a great nation within another nation. I will go down to Egypt with you. I will surely bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. So look at the promises he's making. In Egypt, I'm going to make you a great nation. Then I'm going to bring you back out. He's predicting the Exodus right there in this whole passage. Predicting the Exodus, I'm going to bring you back to the promised land. And it is Joseph himself who will be there when you come to meet me. Joseph will close your own eyes. Well, that's the assurance that he needed, isn't it? God didn't tell Jacob how long Israel would be in Egypt, nor did he describe to Jacob how large the nation would come. We know that they would be there for over 400 years. We know that Israel grew to a nation of somewhere between 1 and 3 million people during those years. But all Jacob knew was that God was going with them to Egypt and that he would make Jacob's family a great nation. That's really all the old man needed to hear for the moment. Now he could proceed in peace. But God's final promise of assurance was that he would someday bring all the Hebrews back to Canaan, which is appropriately called the Promised Land. Now, making a major move can be one of the most insecure times we ever face in life. Pulling up roots in one place and trying to put them down in another can not only be fearful, but depressing. That's why and I'm reading Swindoll here, that's why Swindoll thinks it's wise to pause here and understand the value of Jacob's hearing God's voice of approval. I've known people who have taken years to adjust and some who just never adjust. For the Christian, this is heightened by a sense of wonder over whether God is in the move. And even when we feel assured that God is in it, we can still experience times of uncertainty and discouragement. Now, I'm referring not only to a geographical move, but also to a career change or a domestic move even from single to married or vice versa. Big, big changes. The assurance that God is with us during such alterations in lifestyle and adjustment periods is terribly important. Then Jacob also illustrates that there's much, much more to consider in a move than more money or greater comfort or ease. Making a move involves so much more than accepting an offer for a larger salary or managerial advancement. Or for some of you, am I going to go retire with my kids and grandkids somewhere? Well, as children of God, we're to listen to the voice of God and ask, is God in this? Does this please him? And that's why Jacob impresses us right here. He said, I've been old and I've seen a lot, but I've got to make sure that this is what you want, oh Lord. That's kind of what Jacob is saying to us. Now, are you there, God? Are you in this? Listen to something else he says. Jacob was also facing a whole new experience. He was being asked to move from his simple rural monotheistic lifestyle in Canaan into this sophisticated polytheistic country called Egypt. With all the temptations it would bring, would he and his descendants lose their distinctiveness? This be a dangerous place for us to take our family? See, what we're seeing here is not just a family on the move, but a nation. When Jacob and his family leave Canaan, there will be no Israelites left there, for they are Israel. Now, think about this for just a minute. 70 in all, not even counting wives, children, servants, animals, etc. I mean, it's a big move with a big group of people. But where is your country? Sometimes we get tied to geography to the point where we don't realize what's the country God's going to bless? What's where God's people are, the people who are seeking God. And that can move. And thus it can move, whether it's to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south, with the people of God themselves. Where they go, the blessings will go if they are following the Lord's will. Listen, back to Swindoll, only when he knew God was in it did he make the move. I'm impressed with that. I've said a number of negative things about Jacob in this book, so maybe it's a good time to highlight the other side. He was no spring chicken, of course. We've already said he's about 130 years old. So thinking in terms of that, listen to how this old man is willing to face a brand new challenge in what many might consider beyond the twilight of his years. He says, I love this attitude of Jacob. Old Jacob set out with all that he had, and once he got the Lord's nod of approval at the altar in Beersheba, there was no looking back. Good for you, Jacob, my kind of man. When the late General Douglas MacArthur celebrated his 75th birthday, he wrote some very insightful words. I want you to listen to these. He said, in the central place of every heart, there's a recording chamber. So long as it receives messages of beauty, hope, cheer, and courage, so long you are young. When the wires are all down and your heart is covered with the snows of pessimism and the ice of cynicism, then and then only have you grown old. So think about it, friends. Here is Jacob. He might be an old man, but he's got the heart of a youngster. He's ready to go and face this new challenge. Now, what about you? Are you ready to face the challenge that God has for you this year? Some of us are just tired and weary. Instead of facing a new challenge, it just makes you want to quit sometimes, doesn't it? Take heart. Take heart from Jacob, who it says in verse 5, left Beersheba, and Israel's sons took their father Jacob and their children and their wives in the carts that Pharaoh had sent to transport him. They also took with them their livestock and their possessions they'd acquired in Canaan. And Jacob and all his offspring went to Egypt. He took with him to Egypt his sons and his grandsons and his daughters and his granddaughters and all his offspring. Now, I'm not going to read the whole list of some of these that are coming in the rest of chapter 46, but you get the idea. Here was Jacob, a man not just well seasoned in years, but practically past being an elder. He's elderly, and yet he's willing to go on a new adventure with God. Well, where are you today? Ready to just sit below your tree of pessimism and gloom and doom? Because there's a lot of that out there today. It's easy to become cynical. It's easy to become depressed. Are you going to just sit there and just kind of cry in your cup of coffee this morning and say, woe is me, it's really bad. I think I'll just sit here and let God just come take me to heaven. I'd much rather move there than anywhere else around here. Is that what God's calling you to do? Or is God saying, get ready, my friends, for a new adventure? In the words of the old Stephen Curtis Chapman song, saddle up your horses, get ready to ride. God bless you. We'll see you again tomorrow, as it being Friday. Tomorrow will be our biblical perspective on the events of the week. And I'm thinking about touching a very sensitive subject tomorrow. We'll be worshiping together on Sunday and then back here next Monday as we wake up in the Word. Bless you.